I was jolted awake by the whine of a chainsaw tearing through my fence at 6 a.m. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the worst of it. By the time I stumbled outside in nothing but boxers, there was Brenda Thornfield, my neighbor and HOA president, spray painting neon orange X's across what was left of my fence posts while her contractor kept hacking away. The sharp hiss of the paint blended with the shriek of the saw and the crack of splintering wood, creating a chaotic orchestra that drew curious eyes from behind half-closed curtains. The stench of two-stroke fumes mixed with wet paint burned in my nose as a storm of sawdust fell like poisonous snow. I could taste the acrid bite at the back of my throat. Brenda, dressed in high-end yoga pants and a bright safety vest, barked orders like a crazed foreman at a demolition site. "Your fence is 2 inches too tall," she screeched, shaking a wrinkled HOA violation slip. "It ruins my view of the mountains and breaks community rules. 20 feet of my Memorial Gardens fence gone. What would you do if you caught a neighbor tearing down your property at sunrise? Leave a comment with where you're tuning in from and if you've ever dealt with a nightmare neighbor. My name's Marcus Delua, and 6 months ago, I thought moving to Pine Ridge Estates, Colorado would give me a clean slate. I'm a 52-year-old electrician who recently lost my wife, Sarah, to cancer after a brutal 2-year fight that emptied our savings and shattered me. With the insurance payout, I bought this modest ranch house squeezed between 2 oversized mansions, thinking a peaceful suburban street might be what I needed to mend. The fence Brenda was tearing down? I'd built it myself as therapy. Every nail I drove, every board I sanded was a step through grief. The steady pop of the nail gun, the rough cedar under my hands, the sweet scent of stain soaking into fresh wood. It all helped me create something lasting for Sarah. Behind that fence, I'd planted her memorial garden, where lavender and her favorite roses scented summer nights. But apparently, my 6-foot wall of privacy was blocking Brenda Thornfield's $1 million view. Meet the HOA president from hell. She's 48, a real estate agent, drives a white Range Rover with Lux Lady vanity plates, and has 2 spoiled teenage boys whose parties rattle windows down the street. Their beer cans end up scattered across half the neighborhood, but somehow that never earns them violation slips. Her husband's an investment banker who's gone most of the time, leaving Brenda free to stalk our cul-de-sac like some designer dress tyrant. Her campaign against me started right away. She claimed my work truck broke community rules for commercial vehicles that didn't fit the neighborhood's image. When I asked to see that rule, she produced a binder thick enough to stop a bullet full of bylaws multiplying like weeds. I parked inside my garage. She complained my electrical supplies could be seen through the window. I hung a curtain, and the fines rolled in. Grass 1 inch too high, $50 per day. Trash bins left out half an hour too long, $50 per day. A rake leaning against the wall, another $50. Each notice came printed on heavy cream paper, feeling official in my hands, hand-delivered by Brenda herself in clicking designer heels, each step counting down like a timer. Her overpowering perfume, some cloying floral concoction, lingered long after she left, like a territorial marker. Every morning, I'd sip bitter grocery store coffee while reading her latest violation, the taste matching the resentment piling up with the notices on my counter. But the fence, that was her full declaration of war. She claimed my 6-foot 2-inch barrier broke the 6-foot height rule and stole 2 inches of common area that didn't appear anywhere in my deed. She even hired a surveyor just to uncover violations after I ignored her fake-friendly suggestion to lower the fence myself. "This fence kills property values and creates hostility," she announced at my first HOA hearing, held in her own living room instead of the community hall. The crunch of generic cookies on flimsy paper plates filled the silence as board members, her sister-in-law Janet, and 2 elderly neighbors clearly too scared to cross her, nodded like bobbleheads. When I showed proof that 3 other homes had fences the exact same height, Brenda brushed it off as technical nonsense. When I pointed out bylaws required 30 days notice for violations, not her random 72 hours, she jacked my fines up to $300 a day for wasting the board's time. That's when it hit me. Brenda Thornfield had made a fatal miscalculation. She thought I was just another broken widower she could push around. But Sarah hadn't left me with nothing. She'd left me with nothing to lose. And the most dangerous opponent you'll ever face is someone who's already lost everything that mattered. Her next move came with all the grace of a sledgehammer smashing glass. The following Tuesday, she showed up at my front door with a bulging manila folder and a twitchy man in a bargain suit clutching a surveyor's tripod like it was armor. "Mr. Delua," she said, butchering my French surname like it was an insult. "This is Brad Hutchkins from Precision Property Surveys. We're here to document your multiple HOA violations before legal action is taken." The mix of Brad's cheap aftershave and Brenda's choking perfume formed a noxious fog that burned my eyes. As they stomped around my yard, Brad's tape measure snapped open with sharp cracks, while Brenda muttered notes into her phone as if she were narrating a crime scene. Fence height, 6 feet, 2¼ inches. Maximum allowed, 6 feet. Violation confirmed. Brad's voice cracked like a nervous teenager. The poor guy was just clocking hours to justify Brenda's obsession. But that's where she slipped. In focusing so hard on nailing me, she forgot about her own glass house. While they were busy measuring every inch of my property, I strolled the neighborhood with my phone camera. A piece of Sarah's advice floated back to me. "Marcus, bullies always count on their victims not fighting back. That's their biggest mistake." And sure enough, Brenda's yard was a jackpot of violations. Her mailbox? 7 feet tall, over the same height rule she was using against me. Her deck extension? 18 inches past permit. Her high-powered landscape lights? Definitely not on the approved list. The real bombshell, though, came when I ducked into the courthouse on my lunch break. The dusty air smelled of old paper as I dug through records, the squeak of ancient microfiche readers filling my ears. That's when I found it. Pine Ridge Estate's architectural rules had never even been officially filed with Jefferson County. Back during my apprenticeship, an old mentor had taught me the first rule of any fight. Always check if your opponent actually has authority. Always inspect the foundation before you build a house, he'd said. And right now, that wisdom was worth gold. So when Brenda's certified letter arrived, a thick, expensive envelope demanding immediate removal of my fence or $200 daily fines, I was ready to swing back. I invoked Article 7 of the bylaws, formally requesting an emergency board hearing, which meant they had 10 business days to face me. Brenda's response was as petty as expected. She scheduled it for Thursday at 2 p.m., prime working hours, hoping for no audience. Brenda's polished mask slipped, exposing the domineering bully beneath. "This board has full discretion to address urgent threats to neighborhood standards," she proclaimed, inventing regulations on the spot. The decision went 3-1 against me, with only Dr. Hoffman abstaining after quietly studying my evidence. My penalty was hiked to $300 a day for so-called frivolous appeals and disruptive behavior during hearings. As I walked to my truck, the crunch of autumn leaves under my boots echoed like Brenda's authority collapsing. She'd won this skirmish, but the cracks in her control were widening. And desperate people make the kind of mistakes that topple empires. Just 3 days after that farce of a board meeting, Brenda unleashed her legal warhead on my doorstep. The envelope was so thick with glossy letterhead it felt like velvet in my hands. Morrison, Kessler and Associates, the sort of firm that charges $500 just to pick up the phone, demanded I tear down the fence immediately, calling it a structure of intimidation. The real good punch? The letter was dated 2 days before the board meeting. Brenda had secured her lawyer before even pretending to grant me due process. She had scripted this ambush from the start, and the sting of betrayal soured my morning coffee as I scanned the threats on that paper. Then she dragged in county code enforcement. Officer Martinez arrived that afternoon, clearly puzzled as he scrolled through his tablet. Got an anonymous tip about major unpermitted construction. He said, the autumn breeze carrying the scent of fading leaves as we walk my yard. The report described elaborate electrical work and heavy modifications. As Martinez examined every section of my perfectly legal fence, Brenda's heels clicked on her driveway next door. She was openly waiting for me to get nailed. The snap of his measuring tape rang out between our houses as he confirmed what I already knew. Everything checks out. Whoever called this and gave details that just don't exist, he muttered, shaking his head. Sorry to waste your time. But Brenda pressed on. That evening at the mailboxes, I overheard her dripping poison into neighbors' ears. Marcus is one of those difficult ones, she stage whispered to the Hendersons. Lawyers involved now. Property values are going to plummet if we don't act. That was my cue for a counterattack. And mine would land far higher than she imagined. Back in Germany, my commanding officer once told me the sharpest intel is buried in public files people are too lazy to dig through. Control the records, control the field. With his words echoing, I spent 2 long nights at the county courthouse, the musty air of archives swirling around me as I traced the paper trail of Pine Ridge Estate's corporate skeleton that I couldn't stay silent in the face of her corruption any longer. Inside that envelope lay a gold mine. Years of meticulous notes chronicling financial abuses, broken procedures, and blatant power grabs reaching back to Brenda's first days in charge. Dr. Hoffman had clearly been waiting for someone willing to stand up to her reign. And here's the genius part. I wasn't going to block Monday's demolition. I was going to let Brenda swing the hammer herself on live television, believing she'd triumphed. What she didn't know was that Channel 7 News was already lined up to film the so-called enforcement. Sometimes the surest way to topple a tyrant is to let them dig their own grave in front of an audience. Monday morning promised to be the hardest lesson Brenda Thornfield would ever learn. By Friday afternoon, while Brenda was polishing her speech for the demolition spectacle, I stumbled onto the single piece of evidence that would shatter her empire. In the dusty archives of the Secretary of State's office, a suspicion led me to a forgotten folder buried deep in the shelves. There it was. Pine Ridge Estate's articles of incorporation had expired on March 15th, 2021, and were never renewed. The old paper crackled like bones in my hands as reality slammed into me. For 3 years, the HOA had been operating as a dead corporation. Every fine Brenda had issued, every violation letter, every vote she pushed through, they were all legally worthless, as fake as plain money. But the fallout went even further. State law dictated that once a nonprofit dissolves, its assets fall under government supervision. That meant the $127,000 in our HOA's account wasn't Brenda's to control at all. A rush of adrenaline hit as I photocopied page after page, the hum of the copier like a clock ticking down to Brenda's destruction. She hadn't just overreached, she'd been running a racketeering scheme. Even Monday's demolition contract was void, since it came from a board with zero legal standing. If her crew touched my fence, they'd be committing felonies. Driving home through the fading light, the crisp air laced with autumn leaves, I made a tactical call my old commander would have applauded. I wasn't going to tell anyone until Monday. Let Brenda bask in her illusion of control, strutting into her moment of victory while cameras rolled. The larger the audience for her unlawful stunt, the heavier the fallout. This discovery rewrote everything. Sarah Blackwood was going to light up like Christmas morning when she saw it. We weren't just battling HOA harassment anymore. We were staring at criminal fraud, illegal collections, and misappropriation charges worth tens of thousands. The personal impact will be sweeter still. For years, Brenda had bullied 43 families with threats and fake authority. They'd lost money, peace of mind, even sleep. Now they'd find out none of it had ever been valid. That night, standing in Sarah's memorial garden with my hand against the rough fence boards and the faint scent of roses in the autumn chill, I mapped out the perfect trap. On Monday, the fence she hated so much wouldn't just stand. It would become the stage for her downfall. She thought she'd crush me. In truth, she was about to collapse under the weight of her own lies. Mrs. Thornfield, Jake Santos called across the street. Why is your own mailbox taller than the fence height rule you're enforcing? Brenda flushed crimson as more neighbors streamed out, carrying binders of documentation I'd helped them compile. Mrs. Patterson appeared with her meticulous 15 years of records. Others brought photos and notices showing Brenda's selective enforcement. Those questions will be handled through channels. Brenda snapped, her voice sharpening with panic. Today we deal with this dangerous fence. That's when Jennifer Walsh stepped up with her cameraman, flashing the calm smile of a reporter who'd smelled a juicier lead. Mrs. Thornfield, I'm Jennifer Walsh with Channel 7. We're covering the HOA action, but several residents questioned the association's legal authority. Any comment? Brenda's facade cracked like flaking paint. Pine Ridge Estates, HOA has full power to enforce standards, she insisted, but the defensive pitch in her voice betrayed her. Meanwhile, Sarah slid into position near the crew, manila envelope in hand. Documents sharp enough to end this charade. The morning sun lit her silver briefcase as she prepared to flip Brenda's triumph into humiliation. Then came Brenda's last, worst misstep. She spotted Dr. Hoffman with his folder and barked loud enough for cameras. Don't listen to him. He's confused with age and doesn't understand HOA law. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Attacking a respected 78-year-old physician on camera was career suicide. Even her sister-in-law, Janet, once loyal, looked mortified. The foreman, a grizzled man named Chuck, frowned. Ma'am, we're getting mixed messages. Maybe we should wait. Brenda shrieked back. I'm the HOA president. I order you to proceed. At 8 o'clock sharp, as Chuck reluctantly revved his chainsaw, Sarah stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise. Stop. You're about to commit criminal trespass for an entity with no authority. Chuck killed the saw instantly. The two-stroke exhaust hung in the cold air like smoke off Brenda's crumbling legitimacy. What's happening? Brenda snapped, her flawless makeup streaking with sweat. Mrs. Thornfield, you've been served, Sarah declared, slapping court papers into Brenda's shaking hands. This lawsuit and injunction prohibit further property destruction. Walsh's camera caught Brenda's face flickering from fury to horror. Neighbors pressed closer, phones recording the spectacle. This is absurd, Brenda sputtered. The HOA has actually, it doesn't. I cut in, stepping forward with my own folder. The taste of victory flooded my mouth. Pine Ridge, HOA's incorporation expired in March 2021. For 3 years, you fined and collected dues illegally. Gasps erupted. Mrs. Patterson's hand flew to her mouth. Dr. Hoffman nodded grimly. Even Chuck's crew looked at her like she'd grown horns. That's impossible, Brenda whispered. I'd have known. The board is just you, your in-law, and 2 residents you manipulate, Sarah countered coolly. These records show you've siphoned $127,000 from neighbors under false pretenses. Walsh thrust her mic closer. Mrs. Thornfield, how do you answer fraud allegations? That's when Brenda lost control. Her suburban mask shattered. This is a conspiracy, she shrieked. That French bastard's behind it. Probably illegal himself. The slur hung heavy in the air. Walsh's eyes gleamed. This was career-making footage. Chuck's crew packed up fast, sensing disaster. Deputy Collins arrived with sirens just as Brenda spiraled. The metallic clink of his cuffs punctuated her rant. Arrest him, she screamed, pointing at me. He's trespassing, violating a restraining order. That order was based on false claims and voided, Collins said evenly, as Sarah handed him proof. Mr. Delacroix is on his property. You, however, ordered unlawful destruction. Over 30 neighbors now crowded in, cameras rolling as Brenda's world unraveled. Without HOA oversight, this community will collapse, she wailed, mascara streaming down her cheeks. That was my cue. Actually, Brenda, for the first time in 3 years, this community will thrive, I declared. We're forming a legitimate association with real authority and leadership that serves residents, not exploits them. Cheers exploded. Mrs. Patterson cried openly. Dr. Hoffman shook hands with neighbors he'd avoided for years. Even Chuck gave me a thumbs up before driving off. Brenda stood in ruins, her reputation shredded, her future bound in lawsuits and criminal charges. Justice had come to Pine Ridge. 3 months later, the transformation was breathtaking. The class action suit settled for $438,000, paid by an insurer duped into covering a fake HOA. My morning coffee tasted like triumph as Sarah handed me my $127,000 settlement for damages and fees. Brenda's downfall was brutal. Her license suspended 3 years, found guilty of fraud and negligence. Criminal charges brought community service, anger management, and $89,000 restitution. Colorado's Consumer Protection Act allowed triple damages, multiplying the blow. Forced to sell her McMansion, she liquidated cars, chandeliers, even designer decor. Her career was over. No firm would touch her. Last I heard, she fled to Phoenix, her husband filing divorce papers over shame and irreconcilable differences. But our true victory was what rose from the ashes. The Pine Ridge Property Owners Association, properly filed, transparently run, and truly legal, now serves 47 families with fairness. Dr. Hoffman is president, Mrs. Patterson tracks the books, and I oversee maintenance projects with precision. The $50,000 in unclaimed funds became seed money for the Pine Ridge Community Scholarship, awarding $15,000 yearly to first-gen and underrepresented students studying law, advocacy, or public service. Every award honors the neighbors Brenda bullied. My memorial garden became the soul of the neighborhood. The fence she tried to erase still stands. Every board a testament to resisting corrupt power. Sarah's roses bloom brighter each year, their scent mingling with children's laughter. The rough cedar reminds me daily that protecting yourself protects everyone after you. Our annual festival now draws families from nearby towns, eager to see a neighborhood reborn. Patterson's famous apple pie and live acoustic sets replaced the conflicts that once poisoned our block. Property values jumped 12% after Brenda's exit. Families who planned to flee stayed. New residents chose us for our fair governance. The ripples spread statewide. Channel 7's Emmy-winning expose inspired reform. Lawmakers passed the HOA Accountability Act, requiring annual status checks and enforcement transparency. I've since advised on 23 HOA reform cases in 6 states, turning my nightmare into a tool for justice. The fence still shelters Sarah's garden, but now it opens onto a shared walking path uniting the neighborhood. Kids play freely in the Santos yard, where equipment once drew bogus fines. As I sit on Sarah's bench, summer roses perfuming the dusk, I hear families enjoying what we built. Patterson's Roses are now a local treasure. Hoffman hosts monthly coffees to discuss improvements, not punishments. This is what happens when ordinary people say enough. We didn't just beat Brenda. We replaced her with something better. Got your own HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments so we can shine a light on petty tyrants. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more underdog victories. Next week, how a disabled vet outwitted a predatory tow company and got the state attorney general to shut it down. That's it for today's HOA saga. If justice served made your day, hit like, share below, and stay tuned. More outrageous neighborhood battles are coming.